Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax.
Mysterious friend on the night train. That night, the weather was cold. The misty fog filled the streets, creating a scene that was both gloomy and mysterious. I hurried to the train station. My shadow stretched out on the damp ground. The loudspeaker announcing the departure of the last train echoed throughout the deserted station, sounding like an echo from afar. This was not the first time I had taken a late train, but tonight there was something very different. A cold feeling came not only from the weather, but also seemed to penetrate deep into every cell. When I stepped onto the train, I realized that the train was almost empty, with only me and a man sitting in the last seat. He was wearing a long gray coat, his head covered by a hat that covered most of his face. His figure seemed to blend into the darkness. I didn't pay much attention and sat down on a seat near the window, trying to focus on my phone to forget the eerie silence of the train. But then I felt a gaze. His gaze seemed to bore into the back of my neck, causing me to turn my head involuntarily. Yes, that man was looking at me, his cold eyes peeking out from under the brim of his hat. I immediately turned away, trying to think that I was imagining things. But no, every time I glanced back, that gaze was still there, not leaving me for a second. The sound of the train wheels grinding on the rails rang out eerily. I decided to change compartments when the train stopped at the next station. But when I stood up, the man immediately stood up as well. My heart was pounding. I tried to quickly step out of my seat, clearly feeling the heavy footsteps behind me. When I stepped into another compartment, I suddenly stopped. He was already sitting in the last seat of the compartment, looking no different than before. How did he move so quickly? A chill ran down my spine. I didn't dare sit back down. I continued walking through the train cars, but every time, the man always appeared first, sitting motionless at the end of the car, his eyes seeming to see through everything. The train car became quieter and quieter. Only my heavy breathing mixed with the cold echo of the train. Each step seemed to drag me deeper into a nightmare with no way out. When I reached the last station, I hurriedly rushed off the train. My breathing was rapid. The dim light from the neon lights made the station look even more eerie. I tried to calm myself, telling myself that everything was just a strange coincidence. But as I walked on the platform, I heard footsteps behind me. They echoed steadily, slowly, as if deliberately teasing my fear. I turned around. There was no one, but the feeling of being watched did not go away. I walked faster, almost running towards the station gate. When I reached the main road, I immediately hailed a taxi. As soon as the car started moving, I breathed a sigh of relief. But then, through the rearview mirror, I saw him. The man stood under the streetlight, motionless, watching. His eyes never left me. I turned around to get a better look, but when I looked again, he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of that gaze kept appearing every time I closed my eyes. I told this story to an older colleague, hoping to find an explanation. But when she finished listening, her face turned pale. She said that many years ago, on this same last train, there was a man who was being chased by the police. When cornered, he jumped onto the tracks and died on the spot. Since then, many people have encountered similar strange things. Some say that his soul still wanders on night trains, as if searching for someone or something. After that night, I never took the last train again. But sometimes, when I pass by the station at night, I still feel that gaze, a haunting gaze that seems to want to pull me back to that train car once more. The knocker at midnight. Have you ever heard a knock at the door in the middle of the night? It's a small sound, but in the absolute silence, it can make you feel like the whole world has stopped, leaving only fear to creep into your every breath. That's what happened to me, and I wish I had never opened my eyes that night. I live alone in a small house in the suburbs, completely isolated from the noise of the city. During the day, the area is so peaceful that you can hear the birds chirping in the woods. But at night, the silence makes every little sound more terrifying than ever. It was a cold winter night, the pale moonlight obscured by thick clouds. It was past 2 a.m. when I was suddenly awakened by a strange noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind blowing or a tree branch hitting the window. But then, there was a knock on the door, steady and patient. I lay motionless, my heart pounding. A series of questions ran through my head. Who would come at this hour? Why? Gathering up all my courage, I sat up and walked to the window, gently pulling back the curtains to look outside. In the dim light from the porch lamp, I saw a young girl standing there. She was wearing an old white dress. What as if she had just stepped out of the rain, but it wasn't raining tonight. Her hair was disheveled, partially obscuring her face. She didn't look at the door but bowed her head, her hands knocking gently but incessantly. "What do you need?" I asked, trembling, trying to sound calm. The girl didn't answer, nor did she make any movement other than to look up. At that moment, I saw her eyes clearly, 2 empty sockets as black as the abyss. I stepped back, so frightened that I almost screamed, but couldn't make a sound. I rushed to my bedroom, locked the door, and tried to call the police, but my phone had no signal. In my panic, I heard slow footsteps outside my bedroom window. The footsteps stopped, and I felt like someone was staring at me from outside. Gathering all my courage, I went to the window and pulled back the curtains again. No one was there, but on the frosted glass, there were finger-like marks tracing a strange pattern. I lay awake that night, clutching my knife for protection, until the sunlight shone through the window. Everything seemed normal again. I walked out the front door and noticed the muddy footprints were still there, stretching from the steps to the main road. I couldn't sleep well for the next few days. Every night, I felt something was different. Footsteps on the porch, the wind whistling in my ears like someone was whispering. A week later, while cleaning the house, I found a small piece of paper under the doormat. There was only one line scrawled on it. "Thank you for not opening the door. Next time I won't ask." I didn't know who had left the note, but I knew I had escaped something terrible. From that day on, I decided to sell the house and move elsewhere. But there was one thing that I would never forget. One day, while packing my things into the truck to leave, I met an elderly woman who lived a few streets away. She stared at me, then asked a question that made me shiver. "Did Anna knock on your door too?" She came to my house back then. Anyone who opened the door for her never lived to tell the story. I never thought that moving to a new apartment would bring such a haunting experience. The apartment I chose was on the 14th floor of an old apartment building, a place where you could feel a strange, cold, and scary atmosphere as soon as you stepped in. But I told myself that it was just the initial feeling of moving to a strange place. Until one night, I realized that this place was not just cold, it also contained dark secrets. From the first days of moving in, I heard some rumors from the neighbors who had lived here for a long time. They said that the 14th floor was the strangest floor in this apartment building. Some people who used to live on this floor had moved away without knowing the reason. An old man downstairs once told me that many years ago, a family was murdered in the apartment at the end of the hallway, apartment 1408. After that, the apartment was abandoned, and since then this hallway has always had a gloomy atmosphere. I try to put those stories out of my mind, thinking that they were just baseless rumors. However, strange phenomena began to occur after I moved in. At night, I often heard a gentle, regular knock on the door, right at 2 a.m. When I looked through the peephole, the outside was completely empty. Once, I heard children's laughter coming from the end of the hallway. But when I opened the door, the whole area was still silent. The scariest thing was that I lived alone, and there were no children in this area. Things came to a head one night when I went to take out the trash around 12 a.m. The hallway was deserted. Only my footsteps echoed. As I walked, I suddenly felt like someone was staring at my back. I turned around. No one was there. But as I continued walking, the footsteps suddenly sounded behind me, clearer and faster. I stopped, my whole body cold. A vague whisper sounded, as if someone was speaking right next to my ear. "Don't come back." Ignoring the whisper, I turned around and saw it. At the end of the hallway, a dark shadow stood still, as if made of thick black smoke. It had no face, no eyes, just a mass of darkness standing still, heading towards me, while I was still frozen in fear. The hallway lights suddenly flickered continuously, then went out. In the darkness, the footsteps got closer, and I heard a chilling laugh. I panicked and ran back to my room, slammed the door, but still felt like that dark shadow was standing right outside. From that night on, the strange phenomena did not stop. One morning, I woke up to find a faint black handprint on the front door. I tried to wipe it off, but the handprint seemed to be etched into the wood. Sometimes at night, I would hear footsteps pass by the door, stop, and then disappear. Another time, while watching TV, I felt someone sit down next to me on the sofa, even though I was completely alone. I tried to find out more about the 14th floor and apartment 1408. An elderly neighbor finally revealed that the family that was murdered years ago was not a rumor. The police did not find the killer on the night of the murder. It is said that the spirits of that family are still here, wandering the hallways, looking for justice. The old man also warned me, if you see that shadow again, don't stand still. It won't just stand there and watch you. I'm considering moving, but every time I think about leaving, I dream of that dark figure standing at the head of my bed, pointing at the window. The dreams are getting clearer and clearer, as if it's trying to convey something. I don't know how much longer I can endure, but one thing is certain. The 14th floor is no place for humans.
Thanks for tuning in to today's horror story. If you have a horror, mystery, or haunting story you'd like to share, send it to us at Urban America Horror, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode when we upload it. We'll always be here waiting for your next horror story.